Hello everybody and welcome to day 4 of Advent. I'm Luke.
And I'm Matt.
And this is the Beer Jerk Premium Advent Calendar, day 4, in which we take a trip to Wellington and... Ooh, some nice meaty bits in there.
Ooh,
interesting, yeah. So today we are taking a trip with George Duncan, to Field and Green. Which is a restaurant, right?
Yeah, so that's a restaurant on Wakefield Street in central Wellington, and they specialise in kind of what they call European soul food. And so this was a beer that was brewed for Wellington on a Plate, which is one of my favourite New Zealand events.
Yeah.
It's tied into Burger Wellington, which is my favourite part of Wellington on a Plate because I love a good burger. But it's a month-long celebration of dining out in Wellington. And a lot of the restaurants, basically all of the restaurants in Wellington, go all out providing custom menus, one-off for the event, and they do guided tastings at restaurants and food pairings, and it's an amazing celebration of food, unlike anything I've seen almost anywhere in the world. So if you're in Wellington, I believe it's during the month of August where they do Wellington on a Plate, and it's just a stunning time to be down there and eating delicious food, and people really having fun and showcasing the wild side of food and experimenting and talking about food and heroing it.
Yeah.
And this is something that this beer is influenced by.
Yeah, and talking of wild, excellent collaboration with Duncan's, because Duncan's march to the beat of their own drum.
Certainly does.
Duncan's just do all kinds of interesting beers that I suppose there's a lot of inspiration from the culinary world. So there's always lots of food inspiration and especially dessert inspiration in Duncan's beers.
Yeah, so George Duncan, who's the owner, founder, head brewer of Duncan's, has a massive sweet tooth, and he loves to experiment with fruit, lactose. I think he is the king of lactose in New Zealand brewing. There's no lactose in this one though.
Yep.
Those lactose-free of you will be glad to know.
Vegan beer.
And lactose brings a really big sweetness and body, which George loves to play with. And specifically, he loves to play with that in big imperial stouts and in fun fruited sours. Whereas this is a kind of more Australian traditional kind of, I say traditional in the loosest sense, but kind of more classic expression from Duncan's. So this is, as you may have noticed, a sour ale. So this is our first sour in the Advent calendar this year, and they can be a little divisive. There are a lot of people who, for whom sour beers aren't their thing, but we love them. That kind of tartness really gives a really great summery vibe, so perfect for this time of year when the weather's warming up. And this is what's known as a kettle sour. So there are two ways to make sour beers. The first is to put them in barrels and wait a long time, a long time,
so that's wild fermentation, so it's the wild bugs and things like Brettanomyces, Pediococcus, and you saw these bacteria and bugs get in there, and these organisms just ferment the beer and give it a real tangy wildness. That's lots of complexity in there, lots of time, and that's an expensive way to make beer because it takes so long.
Yeah. But it is delicious, and you can find some great examples of wild ferment sours around New Zealand. But what you'll more commonly find is this, which is known as a kettle sour. So the way that kettle sours are made is you take all your mash, your barley, oats, wheat, whatever grains you're using to make the beer, and you extract all the sugars from them, you get all the liquid out. And normally at that point in the brewing process, you start to boil it. Whereas when you're making a kettle sour, you stop kind of halfway through your brew day, and get a pre-made culture of those bugs that Luke was talking about, lactobacillus and others, and you chuck them in there, and they love that kind of sugar-rich environment, and they go to town producing the acid, lactic acid, that gives it that tartness, and that takes about a day or two. So often brewers will do that over the weekend. They'll brew it on the Friday and come back on the Monday to some nice sour wort. They'll then boil that, which will kill all the bugs and sterilize the beer before, so it's ready for fermentation, and it's already sour at the beginning of the process there. And that's what's been done with this.
And the longer the brewer leaves those bugs in there, the sourer the beer gets. So the brewer beforehand chooses what they want the final pH of the beer to be, and that is what the beer ends up at, depending on how much time the bugs are left in there.
Yeah, and basically they'll once it reaches that final pH is when they will boil it to stop that activity.
And as this is it's a faster way of making a sour beer, and it's you definitely have less complexity from the sour elements than you do with the wild ferment sort of barrel aged type beers. But this is not a new thing. Some people are, because of course the popularity of kettle sours has become huge in the last few years, and it's almost like it's given brewers a whole new just a whole new platform to work with different flavors and different kinds of beers. But people have been making kettle sours for centuries. In Germany, you have a beer style called a Berliner Weisse. You have another style in Germany called a Gose, which both of those became more popular in the past decade, really, as craft brewers rediscovered them. And yeah, it's led to all kinds of interesting beers like this. You can do a hell of a lot with interesting kettle sours, and it's not a it's not a modern bastardized sort of thing. A bit like yesterday when we were talking about how wits are using, citrus and different kinds of adjuncts. It's nothing new.
Yeah, and even that style that Luke was talking about, the Berliner Weisse, which I believe Napoleon called the Champagne of the North.
Yeah.
Was in Berlin, that's often served with fruit syrups, Woodruff, raspberry, where so even those fruit additions and using fruit concentrates has a long history.
Yeah, in Germany, the home of the Reinheitsgebot of all places.
Shocking. But adding the syrups afterwards is a way to get around that German beer purity law.
Good point.
But this one is, as we said, in collaboration with a fantastic restaurant in Wellington, and is brewed with figs, black cardamom, and pomegranate. So you're getting a really nice kind of dark fruit sweetness coming through there, and that kind of spice comes in. It's pretty subtle, the cardamom, but but you get that kind of floral cardamom note coming through as well.
Yeah, there's a nice earthy base to this as well. I'm getting some black tea sort of tannins in there as well, which balance really beautifully. I think this is going to be. I think you're really going to enjoy a nice, easy Sunday drink with this. Hopefully, the sun's shining wherever in New Zealand you happen to be.
Yeah, and if you haven't poured your beer already, as Luke mentioned, you may have noticed that there is a few floaties in this one. Often beers that are fermented with fruit. We'll have a little bit of that fruit left in there, which the yeast can eat in the can, and that yeast kind of leaves a little bit of sediment there. There's nothing wrong with that.
No, not whatsoever.
You can integrate it into the beer by swirling it up, or you can pour the beer very gently to avoid pouring that into your glass. Either way is fine. It's not going to do any harm. There's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah. It's just it doesn't look as pretty for your Instagram photographs.
Yeah, it's not as beautiful, but that's fine.
I think they did a great job with this. Really cool to see an interesting collaboration.
Yeah.
And yeah, outside of the Wellington, it's Wellington on the plate.
Yeah.
I think we bought pretty much the entire batch
We did.
for you wonderful people.
I think this is we're the only place that's been available outside of the venues for loans on the plate. So
yes, another pretty exclusive beer that you're drinking. So yeah, I hope you guys all enjoy it as much as we do.
yeah, and we'll see you tomorrow for another cracking beer.
See you tomorrow.
Cheers.